democracies seem to still have a glimpse of hope in places where the civil society is really strong, well-organized, and vigilant. In places where civil society immediately recognizes that democracy is actually under attack and they have to work together to protect it. Hi, welcome back to the second part of this episode of Podcast Hubungan Internasional. This podcast is brought to you by the Department of International Relations, Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'm Ayu Diasti Rachmawati. In part 1 of this episode, Daniel and I have discussed elections in East Asia, the Pacific, the Americas, and Europe.
What's going on in Africa, Ayu?
Thank you for asking about Africa, Daniel, because as many as 19 countries there are having election this year. And some of these countries actually experienced coup before. So some of those elections must be done this year as a part of a pact during transition, that at some point the military junta who carried out the coup must help the transition to civilian rule. But then again, unfortunately, in some of this country as well, mostly in the Sahel part of Africa or the western coast of Africa, some of these countries that experience coup, the military junta decided to simply postpone the election for no reason and sometimes in a non-foreseeable future. So, for example, in Mali, the military junta promised to organize a general election this February 2024. But last year, they simply said that they have to postpone the election because of technical problems. And when it comes to military junta, you really don't know what that technical problems mean, right? So that's what happened there. I also heard some alarming news about democracy in Senegal. It is very unfortunate because, as we all know, Senegal has been perceived as one of the strongest democracy in the region. It has been considered as one of the few consolidating democracies in Africa where political volatility and tensions seem to dominate the political scene in the continent. But then I think it's around a week ago that the current President Macky Sall, decided to call off elections just 3 weeks before it is held. The parliament in Senegal also followed suit by passing regulations that practically extend President Sall's tenure and delays election until December this year. Some experts, as reported by the BBC, have called this move as a constitutional coup, in the sense that a coup carried out by deliberately changing the stipulation of the constitution. This move would put democracy in Senegal on the brink, but then it remains to be seen whether the citizens of Senegal can really protect their democracy. Before they managed to dodge President Sall's call for a third term, now we also know that right after the parliament passed regulation postponing the election, a series of protests have been present in Senegal, led by both the opposition and the civil society group. So yeah, the presence of protests resisting the attempt of the executive power to expand its authority is certainly an important pushback that we all would like to see. But still, it remains to be seen whether the Senegalese will be succeeding in their effort to resist democratic backsliding. So moving to North Africa, we are seeing Tunisia. Maybe some of our listeners Remember that Tunisia was among the very first countries, and not the first country, that really started the Arab Spring, right? After the Arab Spring, Tunisia was really seen as a reference, as a main reference for democratic progress, democratization in the region. But then, unfortunately, in 2021, President Said, probably frustrated over the system of checks and balances, decided to implement some policies that practically strengthen his position as executive leader, but at the same time undermine other democratic mechanisms such as the judicial branch and the legislative branch. He even, for example, disbanded the parliament back in 2021. So it is in that context of former reference for democratization turning current autocratizers that we have to observe closely the election in Tunisia this year. Algeria is also interesting. There have been pushes on behalf of the government, the current president, to make sure that the playing field is tilted toward his way. He chose the members of the National Election Commission so that may benefit the ruling party. He also, for example, implement policies that would crack down on dissents to an extent that independent media outlets, for example, would censor themselves. So the level of self-censorship in Algeria is pretty high. But then at the same time, the country has also seen a lot of democracy protests. And interestingly, this democratic protest has been very cross-sectional. So it's not just protests by the secularists, but it has also involved the Islamists, the professionals, and pretty much, many members of the civil society. So again, a vibrant, a vigilant, and a well-organized society might as well, dodge the push for autocratization in Algeria. Another good stories may come from Ghana, another good example of democracy from Africa, where the good quality of not only democracy, but more specifically election, is really owing to the presence of professional military. Again, I hope I don't repeat myself too much, but I don't know why this combination of factors keep coming up in the news about the success of democracy in Ghana. So the presence of professional military, including the police, the presence of vigilant and well-organized society, and the country is really known for the professionalism of its electoral commission. So it's one of the strongest electoral commission in the region. So we have a consolidating democracy there. Last but not least, to end on a not really happy note, not that we have to be pessimistic, but it's a reminder really for all of us, is the story from South Africa. So ANC has dominated South African political scene since 1994. The party has become parliamentary majority, but then this election, it is possible that the party will only receive less than 50% of national vote. ANC has been experiencing, a declining popularity since 2007, and, for reasons that can be easily found in other countries, which is growing systemic corruption. So disillusionment due to a very corrupt political practices. This leads to the perception that the party is getting away from ordinary South Africans. The party is actually only interested in itself. That is what I have for Africa so far. Do you have any other info about Africa?
So if we can sum it up, rather Arab winter than Arab spring. Yeah? And if there are generals, there's no general election or something like that.
Yeah. There have been generals, but no general election. It used to be Arab spring. Now it's Arab winter, spring to winter. It's pretty extreme. It might as well a climate crisis. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ayu. Okay. Let's move on. Again, in our journey to the east, look at South Asia a little bit here. Also, kind of the whole entire region seems for having 4 important elections. So there are parliamentary elections in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, and likely parliamentary and presidential election in Sri Lanka. Yeah, India will we'll see likely Prime Minister Modi re-elected for his third term. He is still very popular with a majority of the voters. India is doing quite well economically. It has also started to flex its muscles now more on the international scene. It's sent kind of some probes to the moon, so kind of pushed for like kind of an important middle power in the world. And many Indians like it. But of course, there's a flip side to that also. Modi is part of the BJP, which drives a very strong kind of Hindu chauvinistic ideology, so kind of mobilizing people against the Muslim minority and other minorities. Civil liberties have gone down significantly under Modi in the last couple of years. So Freedom House has moved India from the free to the partly free cauldron. Media freedom, press freedom, there are court cases against opposition politicians, internet shutdowns, and so on. So not everything is going well. So we also see kind of some what we can call democratic backsliding. In India, the opposition has united under Congress leader Rahul Gandhi of the Gandhi-Nehru dynasty. He is kind of trying to garner the opposition by kind of doing what Gandhi did. So he does like huge marches, thousands of kilometers through the whole of India. Is now embarked on his second of these marches. If this is going to help kind of Congress and its allies kind of to win the election is everybody's guess. Most likely it's not going to be enough to stop Modi from getting a third term, from which many think that, it might kind of be very dangerous for the future of Indian democracy. Bangladesh already voted in January, and like kind of here, we really have kind of strong autocratization happening. So the Awami League basically has arrested or in house arrest the opposition leader, and opposition has boycotted the election. So they basically won a huge majority again under their leader Sheikh Hasina. One Time magazine article actually had Bangladesh now a democracy rating which is lower than North Korea. I don't think that is really true, but we can see definitely in which direction that trend is going in Bangladesh. On the other hand, Bangladesh is doing economically quite well, so it's kind of interesting development here. Pakistan, politics remain quite messy. A lot of crisis in Pakistan, from impacts of climate change, extremism. They just fired rockets with Iran and force and back, and the economy is not doing well. Inflation is high. Prime Minister Imran Khan, the former cricket player, was arrested. They just got indicted for I think 10 years, and there are more indictments coming. So basically, he's not be able to run. On the other hand, the former Prime Minister Sharif, he was also in prison, indicted, in exile. He came back. His indictments have gone. So he is probably now the favorite kind of with his party to win the election. Benazir Bhutto's son is also running. Might be kind of decisive on kind of which party can form a majority. But in the end, the military will have kind of a veto on most of the politics. And we'll see how long kind of any government can stay kind of in power in Pakistan. And maybe what could be the bright spot in South Asia is Sri Lanka. They had non-violent revolution, we can say, like 2 years ago. It's a big economic crisis. The country defaulted. President Rajapaksa and his kind of family clan were engaged in corruption and war crimes, most likely during the civil war. He was deposed. Now people stormed the presidential palace. And I hope I can pronounce it right. Then Ranil Wickremesinghe, he took over the presidency in the interim. On the one hand, he managed to stabilize the economy with the help of the IMF, but he relied on the party of Rajapaksa actually to govern because they had the majority in parliament, and he has been postponing the elections. So people are not really happy with him. Question is if he will run. He hasn't decided yet, so politics is wide open. Many people hope, of course, that there will be kind of a reform majority that can get rid of kind of the Rajapaksa family clan and party and usher in an area of democratization and reform in Sri Lanka. But it remains to be seen. Just a quick word, now Iran also will have kind of parliamentary elections. Again, this is not going to be free or fair. In Iran, we have this guardian council that can disqualify candidates when they want to run, and they already disqualified ranges of a kind of liberal and progressive candidates. So it's only the conservatives that are running. So they're going to win the election. And we also had big protests, of course, in Iran the last year. So we'll see how the protest movement will impact. Also, it has largely been crushed through quite some big repression. Lots of people imprisoned, beaten up, even kind of executed. Guesses are, or prognosis is that less and less people are going to vote. Now, already in the election, less than 50% went voting. So the legitimacy of the Iranian political system is definitely getting lower and lower. So we'll see about the future of kind of this clerical autocratic regime, particularly now that Khamenei is very old. The succession for the Islamic leader will kind of be on the agenda in the next couple of years. Yeah, so much for our overview around the world. So what can we, what's the conclusion? Is there any common themes we can identify about all the elections? Ayu, what points you would like to make? Also, in line with the Garuda in the room or elephant in the room, the Indonesian election.
Yeah, they say, comparing other countries are important so that we can learn more about ourselves, right? What's striking to me, one, is, of course, now the push for autocratization, so the move away from democracy is, more gradual in a way. In a sense, many don't really involve like military coup or, autocratic push by force. But at the same time, the strategies that political incumbents in many parts of the world have used to enlarge their power, to abuse their power, are actually relatively the same. So they're not really creative on that front. So what we have seen, for example, like combining populist promises with a strong public persona through the use of social media, and probably a bit of, misinformation or, right? And second, for example, the use of carefully inserting your allies, right? Nominating your allies in key, ideally independent state institutions like the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, the National Election Commission, in order to boost the support for your own party or your own candidacy. That sounds like similar, right, to what we have back home. The use of, national budget facilitated by your proximity to the incumbent president, for example, is also there. The crackdowns of dissidents, of oppositions, the censorship of media, like these are all the strategies that, a lot of media have mentioned as the ways with which, autocratizers are trying to get elected. And I find this everywhere. It's not new, it's systematic, it's gradual, but it's also like the strategies are the same. So we have to learn from that, I think. I don't know, what strikes you the most before I continue my point?
Well, I think what worries me the most coming from a European background is that one can really say fascism is back. And there is kind of growing what we can call like kind of an international of right-wing populist and fascist parties, funded by sources in the US and Russia, and kind of trying to influence elections. Now we can say, of course, Western democracies have tried to influence elections by kind of, sponsoring civil society and so on and so on. But there's definitely like a kind of a brewing kind of backlash also now from the kind of political bad guys, kind of through, as you said, social media, through sponsoring political parties, through networking and so on, that is going on. I think, many democracies are more resilient than we think. And I think there is pushback, but I think still the wave towards autocratization is still rising. And hopefully we will break at some point before it is too late. I think also important to say, it's clear elections do not make democracies. No? So there's a lot of elections that are in no way kind of democratic. No? So you need good elections to be a democracy. No? So that's important. No? But by no way is an election enough to kind of make a country democratic. But yeah, it seems that even North Korea will have elections. So even the worst autocrats still think they need some form of legitimizing via the ballot box. No? So elections are important in a way, even if they are farce in many countries.
Yeah, I agree on that point because what we have is competitive authoritarian countries, right, where elections are still there, but it's rendered meaningless by a lot of abuse of power. I think on that front, on the topic of pushbacks, many journal articles that I've read are saying that when horizontal accountability, meaning the ability of state institutions to hold each other's accountable, as well as vertical accountability, meaning the ability of electoral systems to hold the government accountable, are failing, which is often the case with in countries experiencing democratic backsliding, the last resort of protecting democracy is diagonal, what experts, what scholars have been called establishing diagonal accountability, meaning the use of civil society forces and the media to establish some sort of control over the government, the autocratizing government, to be precise. And to some extent, we can also see that, although we cannot really say the end result of these pushbacks, but we sort of see that in some countries that we have discussed so far, Daniel, democracies seem to still have a glimpse of hope in places where the civil society is really strong, well-organized, and vigilant. In places where civil society immediately recognizes that democracy is actually under attack and they have to work together to protect it. Yeah, and it seems that the working together part, the coalition that the civil society built to protect democracy, must also be cross-sectoral to be successful. If they remain to be polarized and fragmented, it is very easy for the autocratizing government to co-opt one of them or to create some sort of rift, and therefore weakening the democratic pushbacks that we're really looking for and we are really needing in this time. Yeah, I guess that would be my take from all of these cases that we've been discussing. So I guess it's another key point, for us, if we believe that Indonesian democracy is currently backsliding, the accountability practically declining between the key state institutions, which the result of the election are pretty much kind of quote-unquote determined from the beginning. So, what we can do is really relying on mobilization of pro-democratic civil society, and we can learn from the experience from other countries on how to mobilize their forces, I guess. Yeah. So, I guess that would be my two takes from all this discussion. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I would like to deeply and sincerely apologize to all the countries who have elections that we have not mentioned in this podcast yet. Your elections are by no means less important than the elections we discussed, but there are limits to the time and space we have for discussing. So I hope that democracy will win and not autocracy throughout 2024, and that we will see more positive than negative trends in the election.
If you happen to have more information about elections in your country, just put that comment section.
Yep, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you for listening and stay tuned for more of Podcast Hubungan Internasional. I'm Daniel Petz.
I'm Ayu Diasti Rachmawati. Thank you for listening.
Peace out.